The Lamb's Book of Life series, Part 2, The Books and Their Purpose. Revelation chapter 20 and verse 12. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the Book of Life. And the dead were judged out of those things that were written in books according to their works. These are the books which contain the records of the lives of men and women and are the evidence that is presented in the judgment. The judgment in the Bible is portrayed as being similar to that which happens in an earthly courtroom. No sentence passed upon any wicked person will be arbitrary, biased, or unfair. Notice that sentence is only passed on the wicked, as they are the only ones held to be found guilty. Both the major prophets of the Bible mention the books that are used in the judgment. In Daniel chapter 7 and verse 10 we read, "A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened." Describing the same event, the Apostle John writes in Revelation chapter 20 and verse 12, "And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened." The books may be described in the following way. Number 1, there is the Lamb's Book of Life, wherein are recorded the names of all those who have accepted the service of God. Number 2, the Book of Remembrance, a record of the good deeds of the saints. And number 3, a record of the sins of men. In Revelation 20, which is a record of a vision of the executive phase of the judgment at the end of the 1,000 years, otherwise known as the millennium, the following classification appears. Number 1, the Book of Life, containing a record of the good deeds of the saints. And number 2, the Book of Death, containing the record of the evil deeds of the unrepentant. These are compared against a third book. This is the statute book, the Bible, according to whose standard men are judged. We can find references to the books throughout the Bible. For example, book number 1, the Book of Life. Psalm 69 and verse 28, in the Peshitta Aramaic version, it reads, "Let them be blotted out from your book of life, and let them not be written with your righteous ones." Book number 2, the Book of Remembrance. Malachi chapter 3 and verse 16 says, "Then they that feared the Lord spake often one to another, and the Lord hearkened and heard it, and a book of remembrance was written before him for them that fear the Lord and that thought upon his name." Likewise, in Psalm 56 and verse 8, and again reading from the Peshitta Aramaic version, it says, "I have shown you my confession, put my tears before you and in your book." Book number 3, the record of the sins of men, can be found in Isaiah 65 and verse 6, where it says, "Behold, it is written before me, I will not keep silence, but will recompense, even recompense into their bosom, your iniquities and the iniquities of your fathers together, saith the Lord." Every man's work passes in review before God and is registered for faithfulness or unfaithfulness. Opposite each name in the books of heaven is entered every wrong word, every selfish act, every unfulfilled duty, and every secret sin and every attempt to deceive in regard to our feelings. God is not mocked. Every neglected warning or reproof sent to us from God is recorded. wasted moments, missed opportunities for improvement, every influence exerted for good or for evil, with its far-reaching results, all are recorded by the angels appointed for such work. Next to these books of record is placed the law of God, the standard by which the characters and the lives of both men and women will be tested in the virtual day of judgment. No wonder the Bible says in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verses 13 and 14, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil." When the judgment takes place, we will not need to be present. All judgment can be conducted remotely. In the heavenly courtroom, we may find the same personages that we find in the earthly. The 19th century theologian E.W. Bullinger correctly translates the meaning of Daniel chapter 7 and verse 9 as being, "I continued looking till that the seats of judgment were set." The word translated as thrones in the King James Version, referring to the cushions that were placed in the city gates where the judges would sit. Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 18 says, "Judges and officers shalt thou make thee in all thy gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, throughout thy tribes, and they shall judge the people with just judgment." These judges were a type of God, their judgment a type of God's judgment, so they must judge according to God's law. Psalms 82 and verse 1 says, "God standeth in the congregation of the mighty, he judgeth among the gods." Have you ever thought what that phrase means? What about verse 6? "I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High." Psalms 82 is God's arraignment of the unjust judges who are bearing sway over Israel. It was probably composed at a time when there was much that was unjust and corrupt in the administration of justice. But in verse 1 we are told that God, or in the Hebrew Elohim, judges among the gods, which is also the Hebrew Elohim. These gods can also be referred to as judges, as Elohim can be translated this way. For example, in Exodus 21 and verse 6, "Then his master shall bring him unto the judges," Hebrew Elohim. And Exodus 22 verses 8 and 9, "If the thief be not found, then the master of the house shall be brought unto the judges," Hebrew Elohim. Both parties shall come before the judges, the Elohim, and who the judges or Elohim shall condemn, and it goes on. Judges may be called Elohim in the sense that judges are representatives of God's sovereignty. Look at Exodus chapter 7 and verse 1. "And the Lord said unto Moses, See, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet." Whilst in the worldly sense Pharaoh was Moses' superior, as a representative of the God of heaven and earth, Moses was superior to Pharaoh. Pharaoh's power was but human. Moses was divine. So Moses was to be to Pharaoh as a god, with authority and power to command obedience. Nowadays, there are some that get confused by this psalm and Christ's reference to it and think that it means that we are little gods. But there is only one God, the God of heaven, the great I Am. Now there is another important point that is found in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 9. The Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. We may ask the question, where did Christ go when he ascended into heaven after his resurrection? According to 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 22, he is on the right hand of God. But in this judgment scene, look at what happens. In Daniel 7:13, after the Father has entered the throne room, Daniel saw one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. The Father moves into the place of judgment on his throne, and then Christ is brought into the same place. This is a description of the events of the 22nd of October 1844, with Christ moving into the most holy place so that the cleansing of the sanctuary can take place, the judgment that takes place before Christ's return. Those who in the judgment are accounted worthy will have a part in the resurrection of the just. The righteous dead will not be raised until after the judgment takes place, when they are accounted worthy of the resurrection of life. Hence, they will not be present in person at the tribunal when their records are examined and their cases decided. It should also be considered that John chapter 5 and verse 22 tells us that the Father judgeth no man, but has committed all judgment unto the Son, whilst 1 John chapter 2 and verse 1 tells us that we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. Jesus the judge will appear as our advocate to plead in our behalf before God. Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 24 says, "For Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us." Hebrews chapter 7 and verse 25 goes on to say, "Wherefore he is able also to save them to the uttermost that come unto God by him, seeing as he ever liveth to make intercession for them." As the books of record are opened in the judgment, the lives of all who have believed on Jesus come in review before God. How important is it then that our names should be written in the Lamb's Book of Life?